I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
What is up, everyone, and welcome back to the Biblical Hitman. I'm your host, Steven. I've got two of the best podcasters that I know in the same studio, folks. Doc Brown, host of the Prometheus Lens, and Tim Constantine, host of Sixth Sensory Podcast. I'm excited to get into this episode, folks. We're going to touch on some bloodlines. We're going to dig into a bunch of the fringy stuff. And some of these topics may be controversial, so I'm just going to throw that out there. But folks, if you like the show, you want to support what it is I do here, head on over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button, like the show, share it with your friends, and comment on all the things. You could also follow the show on audio platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify. I've got an ad-free avenue on Spreaker if anyone wants to support me in that way. Just trying to, make the show a little bit more flexible for people. But with all that said, gentlemen, welcome to the show. Doc, good to see you. Tim, welcome, guys.
Good to see you.
Let introductions be. I'll let you guys do introductions. I know it's who knows when to speak at these points, but I'll start with you, Tim. Tim, just tell the people where they can support you and just a little bit about your show.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Happy to be here. Doc, good to see you as well. This is going to be fun. I mean, how could it not, right? And you can find me at Sixth Sensory Podcast. I spell it out SIX. I'm on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, and Patreon, and I have an Instagram. Best place to find me, though, is Spotify. And yeah, hidden history, Bible, conspiracy, all that stuff. Just come check it out. Happy to be here.
Right on, brother. Right on. Doc, man, if you could just let the people know where they can support you as well.
Hey, man, thank you for having me. And hey, we got two Tennessee boys in the house, so I broke out the coveralls, man. So got the Tennessee treatment. But no, I think you have me, Steve. But anywhere you can consume content, guys, Apple, Spotify, all the things. Same thing with the social media. It's a Prometheus Lens Podcast. You can find me there in the website, PrometheusLensPodcast.com. All the things you guys know the deal. And if you don't know me, I'm going to wire this out till the cows come home. This is my book that I wrote this past year, The Epic of Esau, The Birthright and Seed War. Grab you a copy of that. You can find that on Amazon in all three formats, digital, hard copy, and audio. So you're without an excuse, even if you can't read. I got you, bro. I got you.
Let's go, man. You even got the little accent, to kind of throw it up a little bit. Listen, I wanted you guys to come on the show. First of all, the audience loves you guys, loves your shows. You guys did a show together. You were getting into a little bit of the serpent seed stuff, bloodline stuff. Both of you guys are really good in this topic. Both of you guys have great angles on how you can attack this subject. You get into it with your book, Doc, and I figure one of the best places to start, right, with bloodlines, seed wars, this idea that really a lot of Christians are not in tune with. They've never heard of it, and someone watching this episode for the first time, this might be new to them. So let's just kind of start with Genesis, right? Like we see something happening in the garden, and one thing too, just to point out, with the latest news, right, with the island stuff, the files being let out, Epstein, the lid is kind of opened up a little bit to what these elites are into, and the fact that our world is in a way governed and manipulated by these elites, and they have connections to bloodlines, and really one of the big things that they hold very valuable to themselves is that they have like this blood that's more pure than the rest of the world, right? And so Doc, just take me through, Genesis. You talk about this in your book, and there's a very significant event that happens in the beginning, right? So, you got Adam and Eve in the garden, and they come across this serpent. It's really wild stuff.
Yeah. Well, honestly, too, you gotta go back to the original languages to get into the etymology of the words and what they mean, the cultural context. We tend to look at things with our modern perception and put our spin on things, but we have to look at it through the mindset of these ancient people, because it's ancient people that wrote this story, and it was ancient people reading these stories. So reading extra biblical books and legends and lore and things like that, I found very fruitful in understanding the text the way that the original writers intended it to be. And serpent seed, I was introduced to this thoroughly with Dr. Joy Pugh, and I'd heard of it before, but people that I highly respected, big brain guys, laughed at it and said there's no water to be held in that cup, so I just never looked into it. And had her on the show, and she started talking about it, and I listened with an open mind, and she totally made more sense to me than any other interpretation of the garden than anybody ever had. Even if I'd never read the Bible, the way she laid it out, it was like, dude, this makes sense. And so that's kind of what got me here. But yeah, when you get to the garden, we're told that Adam and Eve bites this apple for forbidden knowledge, and they're kicked out of the garden. But when you go back and you read, there is no apple in that story. That's just the allegory, or what the pastors tell. And when you have this event, when you go to the Hebrew, that word for serpent is nakash. And I know some people is probably like, golly, you're beating a dead horse. We know this, but hey, there's probably some people maybe tuning in that's new and are not familiar with it, so I don't want to assume anything. But that word nakash can mean serpent, but it can also mean the shining one, or the one who practices divination. And to me, that makes more sense, because, does a talking snake rebel against God and cause Adam and Eve's fall? Or is it a divine being on his holy mountain that rebelled, that they knew, they trusted, and conversed with every single day? To me, that makes more sense. But basically, and I don't want to hog up all the mic here, but I'll just kind of lay the premise and let it breathe, let you guys get in. But when you get into the Hebrew, it just says that Eve partakes of this tree. Okay? And it says when she partakes of this tree, she also goes to her husband, or I'm sorry, let me back up. She partakes of this tree, and she enjoys in the original language. Now, the English, a lot of times it translates it to eats. She partakes of the tree and eats. But when you look at that word, many, many times through Scripture, that same word is translated to enjoys. So she partakes of this tree and enjoys. It says she goes to her husband, and he too enjoys. And then all of a sudden, they cover their sexual reproductive organs, and God comes in and curses them. And all the curses have to do with sexual reproduction. She would have painful menstruation. Her her pain in labor would be increased. And he would put enmity between her seed and thy seed. So it's saying she's got a seed, the serpent, or the nakash, has a seed, and they would be at war, at enmity with each other. So everything to me points to a sexual act, and many stories and legends and stuff, trees are allegorical for their phallic symbols, and they're also symbolic and metaphor for family trees and genealogies and things like that. So I guess we'll just throw that stick of dynamite down for those that's not heard it, and sit back for a minute.
And I know firsthand, and Doc experienced this along with me, that was a very controversial episode. The most controversial episode I've ever done, until, I don't know, maybe something will top it one day. I doubt it. But we presented this information, and you don't have to believe it, but regardless of that stick of dynamite, I want to say this. I have a feeling, this is what I've been looking into too, that somewhere before Genesis 7, which is the flood, that line of Cain bred in with the Nephilim, or combined itself, or just bred with the Nephilim in general. So I think for me, it was like, It's funny, Stephen, when you said early, like, let's start with Genesis. And I was like sitting back, like, perfect. That's exactly where I was hoping to start this thing, because that's exactly what this research has done for me. It took me straight back to the flood. I'm still trying to figure out how all this happened. And I'm still trying to figure out how that Nephilim gene and line of Cain gene survived the flood. So I definitely want to touch on that some. And, for starters, this is what's kind of got me thinking about it, is like looking at some of these other myths, like the myths in Mexico. And this is like a good old fashioned Nephilim lore bloodline story that I found. It's Mexico City was called Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan. It's got the word Enoch in it too, which is interesting. And they said that it was founded by a giant named Tenoch, which that's Enoch with a T, right? Who was born after the flood. And he was one of 7 sons, 6 of whom were giants. So according to that myth, people start having giants again after the flood, and they start building these city empires, Mexico City being one, because that's what it turned into, is Mexico City. And what do we see down there? We see this association with the dragon, the serpent. They love the serpents down there. You've got, Mexico itself is the land of the plumed serpent. Teotihuacan, temple of the plumed serpent. Quetzalcoatl, feathered serpent. Pyramids covered on every side with the serpent. So I went back to Genesis 7:17 through 24. And I'm thinking, I don't think this guy or his ancestors survived the flood, because when you read Genesis 7, it says anything that breathed life through its nostrils died, and the waters covered the tops of the mountains. Sounds like everybody got annihilated. So I'm thinking, how did this happen? How did these giants survive? And I won't go too long on this example, but that's kind of where my head's at with all this, fellas.
Right. And it's all wrapped around copulation, right? Between a divine being and humanity, right? I think we see that in the garden. Very, very high possibility that that's what's going on. But, one thing that you see as well is that when you see the genealogies laid out in Genesis 4, I think it might be Genesis 5 as well. And they're 2 separate genealogies, right? They're very specific. They aren't only at war with each other, but it's clearly a division between who they're worshiping. There's one that's worshiping the one and only true God, and then there's one that's worshiping some sort of mystery religion that is connected to the serpent, right? And I think that has a lot to do with maybe what the tree allegory is. It has something to do with maybe what the serpent was also preaching in the garden, right? Who knows? But you can see this with the genealogies, and you can see this specifically in Cain's genealogies, where there's this mystery religion that is passed down from one to another. And these bloodlines, they keep it private. They keep it within their adepts. And I think at some point they want to unionize with the serpent again. I think they want to go back and revisit that Genesis, scene. I think even the mystics do this with the Kundalini spirit. I think it's a spiritual thing right now, but obviously I do think it was a physical thing back then. One thing I wanted to mention too is Alana Blavatsky, right? She traced the mystery school to what she believed was Atlantis, and then it was passed on to the Aryans, and then from the Aryans to the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, and then to the Egyptians, and then to the Greeks, right? So I find all that very interesting, because it basically describes what may have been happening during the antediluvian period. You have this specific race. There was like a royalty built around it. Genesis 6 gets in and says that these Nephilim were kings, right? Mighty men. So it only takes me back to that. The giants, right? Reappearing after the flood is an interesting thing. There's a few theories of it. Do you guys have anything to say on that? Maybe we can kind of get into like how this bloodline got started back up again after the flood.
Yeah, we can. But before we go there, I just wanted to lay out another couple yellow bricks for people that maybe, when I laid that stick of dynamite down, it's like, nah, that's not mathing right.
Yeah, let's cover that
so-
again. Let's cover that stuff again.
So, how I talked about, that being, I think it's allegory for a sexual act. The original sin is sexual promiscuity. And you look through the fall of many kings like Solomon and the fall of Samson. I mean, over and over again, it's sexual. It's a sexual thing that has them their downfall, because I believe that was the original sin. But when you get there and you get those curses that I mentioned, curses with God, the scripture tells us he's the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. So you can look, all of his curses and punishments correlate to the crime. Always. So why would all those curses be about seeds, genealogies, delivering childbirth, menstruation, all sexual reproduction type curses? Because that's what was happening there. And the etymology of the names, I think that's very important, because we look at these and think these are their actual names. We got to remember, these texts were written thousands of years later, looking back. And if you look, all the names in the Bible, I mean, not all, but a majority, when you look at the etymology of their names, it describes the character of the person in the story. So I'm not saying that these are fantasy. I'm saying that maybe that when they wrote them, they just maybe changed the name or put that in there to kind of tell the character a little bit better. Because like Nimrod, it means to rebel. It was describing his act, in that story. So when you get to their names, Cain means acquired. So hell, what loving mother names their child acquired? And then you look at Abel. Abel's name, it means breath. Why was he named breath? Because Adam was a lifeless being until the breath of God was given to him. So he was in the similitude of his father, and he was named after his father. Cain was acquired. And when you get out of the garden, what happens? The prophecy starts being fulfilled right then. There's enmity. There's war between the brothers. Cain kills Abel. And then later, when Seth is born, it comes right out and says that Seth was born in the similitude of Adam. And his name means the replacement. So why would they go out of the way and say, this other kid is the replacement for Adam's child? And they even take it a step further and say, well, he was born in the similitude of his father. And then, like you had mentioned, Steve, you have these two genealogies, these two trees. If there wasn't two seed lines, what was the point of all that genealogy? Why did they separate them? And then everybody likes to say, oh, well, Enoch was the seventh from Adam. No, he wasn't. But if you go back and read those genealogies, they are. Why? Because Cain was removed from that genealogy, because he was not of that family tree. And even New Testament tells you, he was of the wicked one. John comes right out and tells you, Cain was of the wicked one, who was a murderer from the beginning. So, yeah, and I don't want to just extrapolate and keep taking up all the time, but I wanted to just kind of put that out there for the people that maybe was on the fence or just wouldn't math in what I was trying to lay out there.
Yeah, and I think it's appropriate that we're talking about this in the beginning, what really happened at the beginning as well as. And I think it's appropriate we talk about these names like Cain and Enoch and what they mean, and just set them out here as characters. And I'll tie about on something I said a minute ago too, with this Tenoch from Mexico City, this giant, right? My whole point with that is, Cain had a son or a grandson, I guess, called Enoch. There was an Enoch in Cain's line. With this guy from Mexico City was related to that. And the reason I'm thinking about this, because that makes me think, well, what if his ancestors were on the ark, on the boat? And that's how these giants showed back up afterwards. I'm still trying to figure all that out. How did this gene survive? It's like Stephen was like, we know it was like wild antediluvian times, but what was happening there? I know it got crazy, but what was happening after that too? Like, how did this survive? Within these people that got on the ark, was there a gene that carried the propensity to worship the serpent? Like, it's like there's always some character around throughout the entirety of the Bible who invariably carries this propensity to worship this serpent. Like, and how does it survive the flood? I mean, hopefully I'm not beating on that too hard for this episode, but like that's like the big question mark for me. Would that make a giant from myth like Tenoch a Rephaim, who after the flood goes to settle in South America and revive the serpent cult, making him just an example for this conversation, but still an iteration of the pre-flood dragon bloodline coming back into existence through the wives, I think. Now that's just my personal thing. After looking into it, that's where I'm at with it. I looked at it some. I think that gene had to have survived through the wives.
Well, if you think of it too, I mean, I think we get that story with Esau, right? I mean, didn't he marry into? He had multiple wives, right? But these wives that he married into were of a completely different. I mean,
they were Canaanite women.
They were Canaanite, right? I mean, they were worshiping
Horites and Hivites. And see, but that was after the flood. Now, and this is something too that this is why I love reading the extra biblical books and the legends and the lore, like Louis Ginsburg, Legends of the Jews, because this is what they were reading. This is what they believed. We can debate all day long if it's factual or if it really happened. But regardless, they believed it, and it influenced their writings. And that's why a lot of stuff is so vague in the Bible, because they aren't thinking of us thousands of years later, where an industrial complex of religion comes in and starts taking away scrolls and books. They were thinking about the people of that time. Everybody had access to the scroll of Enoch, Jasher, all these legends and lore and mythology. And in the very least, if you want to, split hairs and talk about dates of these things, in the very least, they were oral traditions and legends passed around before they were written down. But there's two extra biblical sources that talk about this survival of the bloodline. One is in the, I think it's the Testament of Abraham. It says that, because in Genesis, it don't mention Noah's wife's name. And according to that Testament of Abraham, it says that he had a wife, and that's who he has Shem and Japheth with. But she passes away. And then the flood is announced. Or wait a minute, no, wait. God comes forward and tells him that the flood's going to come. And he tells him to go to Naamah, whose name means comely and beautiful, like off Genesis 6. This is the daughter of Lamech, the same daughter that had three brothers that are mentioned in the genealogies, that all of a sudden these guys become masters of metallurgy, sowing crops and all these things. And this is a genealogy. Why would they take the time to list their occupations and what they were so good at? Because it was important. And so a lot of people theorize that where her name means comely and beautiful, when it says in Genesis, the angels came down and bred with the daughters of men because they thought they were comely and beautiful. So they might be saying that she was one of the first. And there's like a dowry. Lamech traded her to the fallen angels for this knowledge. And that's why his sons all of a sudden were masters at these trades. But according to the Testament of Abraham, it says that he goes to Noah and says, I want you to go take Naamah for wife. That way, my prophecy from Genesis 3:15 will still come to pass. I want that bloodline protected for the coming end time judgment. So he takes Naamah for a wife and then breeds with her and has Ham. So you have two people, according to that story, on the boat that have a Nephilim bloodline.
Uh-huh.
And then they get off the boat and it says Ham uncovered his father's nakedness. Leviticus 17 says that that's a sexual act too. It says to sleep with thy father's wife is to uncover thy father's nakedness. So from that sexual union, that's where Canaan comes from. So he's a Nephilimic incest baby. And the other legend says that King Og was riding on top of the boat, that he made a deal with Noah that if he would save him, that he would serve his family all of his life, and that Noah allowed him on the boat. But then once the floodwaters receded, he just took off and done his own thing. And that's why in Genesis it mentions King Og, he was the last of the remnant of the Nephilim, that he was a pre-flood giant.
That's wild. I didn't know that, but that is very interesting. It's fascinating. I've always kind of gone to Sodom and Gomorrah, where like this is maybe where the second incursion took place. But I mean that's very fascinating what you're just getting into, and something to explore. But I just feel like when you have the story with Lot, Abraham, them eating with angels, you had the riot of people wanting to copulate with the angels. It might have been something that was a part of their culture. Maybe it was something of an old story that was being passed around the people. And maybe there was angels in Sodom and Gomorrah. The idea that there was not one that was righteous just brings me back to when the Bible states that Noah was righteous in his days. His genealogies were perfect, right? Like he was unblemished, right? Yes, exactly. So it makes me think of Sodom and Gomorrah, that everyone was tainted. There was sexual immorality. The Bible's specific on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some of the stuff you said there, Doc, was getting me fired up over here.
Hey, you're welcome.
Thank you, sir. If Naamah was given to the Watchers, so to speak, that would be an example of the line of Cain merging with the Nephilim. It's exactly what I've been kind of looking for, this kind of stuff. She's the line of Cain, I know that. And you're saying that she was related to Ham. That's almost too perfect for some of the stuff I've been looking into, because I was thinking that this line...
It's Ham's mother.
It's Ham's mother. I was thinking that this line came through Ham. I mean, that might be a no-brainer to some of you guys who've studied this, but I was thinking it came through two. I was thinking Ham and Japheth, but definitely Ham. Because Ham has Cush and Canaan. We know the Nephilim gene shows back up in the Canaanites, the sons of Canaan, the sons of Ham, essentially. That checks out because, they're the Rephaim at this point, and these guys become the rebellious sons of Noah. Like Stephen said, yeah, Noah was righteous in his generations, but how about the wives? I don't think so. Not all of them. And you got to remember, Cain, by the time you get to Genesis 6 and 7 in the days of Noah, they're not all that far removed from Cain and the first people, Adam and Eve. Cain's like, I don't know, the third person at this point. Those wives are in all probability going to be related to Cain, at least a couple of them, because he's one of the first people. I mean, how could they not be, So Nimrod, of course, Cush has Nimrod, also son of Ham. I see Nimrod as at least symbolically, the revival of Cain, because Cain goes to start he gets kicked out of the garden. He goes to start his own civilization. Nimrod becomes very rebellious and goes to start Babylon. It's just, I think the parallels are there between Cain and Nimrod. It just makes sense that he's related. The Cush goes and settles Egypt, bringing in the Egyptian gods. some scholars would say. So this is a second wave of Nephilim, of giants after the flood, and it comes through Ham. And that's just one example. I think there's more with Japheth, but I could get into that later. What do you guys think?
Go ahead, Doc.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what I believe. I believe that you had the inbred situation there, and Canaan come from that, and then there's the continuation of that family tree, that tree line, the tree line of the serpent. And how Steve had mentioned earlier, I think there might have been second incursions too. So then you have this bloodline, and they're reintroducing angelic DNA into that, and that could be where the Rephaim come from, because it's not as strong as pure blood as it was pre-flood. It's a little diluted and a little watered down, so they're not as strong, they're not as tall. But how Steve had mentioned, once again, they cross back into each other with Esau. Esau's described, and it's a Polaroid picture of Genesis 3:15, the seed war. The angel says, there's two nations, two peoples in your womb. They're at war, at enmity with each other. One will be stronger than the other, the Nephilimic one. It says, but the younger will rule over the older. And then you get the birth, and what does it say? First one comes out red, covered in hair from head to toe like a hairy cloak. He looks just like a fertility god of the people of the region of that time. And he's a set of twins, right? And he has to push on Jacob's head to exit the womb, bruising the head. And Jacob is clutching the heel, bruising the heel. This is Genesis 3:15 all over again, folks. And it's a mirrored image, a microcosm of Cain and Abel. And this is not just stuck to the Bible. It's culture blind. You have so many stories of gods coming down and breeding with women, and they end up getting pregnant, but they're already married. They have a husband. So the God introduces his seed, and then the husband of the woman introduces his seed, and then there's twins born. One is a demigod, and the other is a fleshly, normal person. You have that with Hercules. A lot of people don't know, but he had a twin brother that was completely normal because he wasn't of the seed of Zeus. There's so many, I could just go on, but you find it time and time again. This is not just constrained to the Bible. This is something that's told over and over and over again, because I believe it stems from an ancient source before the dispersion of the peoples at Babel. They're retelling the same story. It's just different names, and over time, the telephone game happens, and they change it a little bit, put their own cultural things to it. But Esau marries into the Horites and Hivites, who are known Nephilim giants, and breeds with them, and brings the Amalekites, who were known as the blood lickers, and they were known shapeshifters and sorcerers. I think they called feral giants back then, maybe what we would call today Sasquatch or Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to mention that phenomenon that you were talking about, right, where you can seed an egg with two different fathers. It's called, and it sounds funny, so don't make fun of me, but it's superfecundation. Okay. I think I've said that right, but forgive me if it sounds a little off. But this is where two or more eggs from the same menstrual cycle are fertilized, by seed from separate acts of intercourse. So it's a real thing. It can happen in the physical realm. I wanted to mention this too, man, which I think it can give some validity to what we're getting into, is you had this incident taking place in Genesis 3, okay? And then you have a separate incident happening in Genesis 6. What I think Satan was doing with this act, not only to try and disrupt the bloodline for Christ to come into the world and to save humanity, right? He was trying to go to war with that, but he was also trying to mimic it. And I think this is where you see in pagan religions, there's always parent gods, and then there's like the offspring gods. Right, you've got where I think we see that in the garden with the serpent intermingling with Eve. Satan knew he needed a consort. He's developing the religion before it has even kicked off and started and been thought about. He's using that divine goddess as Eve to try and use that as his consort to birth a son, right? And so this meshes well with, how the pantheon of gods and then their parent gods work. Because then in Genesis 6, we see things like, multiple gods, which would be, probably like Zeus, Poseidon, so on, like these little smaller gods than the parent gods. So I find that interesting. I think there could be a connection with something like that, and maybe it could back up why the world has worshipped this false trinity for a very long time, right? Very long time.
Yeah. Going back to them tracing their bloodlines back to these parent gods, these little G gods. One came to mind for me. It's Hercules, and so I did some digging on that, and I think this ties back to Japheth, one of Noah's other sons, and the Scythians. They say the Scythians go back to Noah's son Japheth, and according to Herodotus, the first king and ancestral king of the Scythians was Targatos. He was like a sky god, and there was a daughter involved of another god named Danu. It's like Tuatha D. Danu gets involved with this. But anyway, that Targatos was Hercules to the Greeks. So it's like, again, it's like this Nephilim thing. Well, that's supposedly in Japheth's family history. So again, I think this was antediluvian, and I think they somehow figured out who their parent god ancestors were after the flood, right? And I mean, the Scythians became the Druids, became the Merovingians. Now, this is big, right? Like this is the Herodotus and Pliny the Elder said the Scythians were fair-skinned, light-haired. Some of them had red hair. They were tall, men of tall stature. It checks all the boxes here. They were using the swastika as a symbol. They were using the snake as a symbol. You go back to this region where the ark could have probably landed, and you see where the spread of people would have re-begun, if that's the way to put it. Like the spread of people would have happened a second time around, and you get to the Ukraine, you see swastikas on rocks out there and all that. Those symbols, my point is, those symbols and this knowledge was written down for them to find. This gets into the tablets. I was reading the text. There's a couple examples of this. I was reading a text that talked about how two of Noah's sons found some ancient tablets that were buried underneath a mountain near where the ark landed, and they didn't tell Noah about it because they knew their dad would be mad. And it's like they didn't want to throw those out because it was part of their history, their family history. They knew they should have, but they didn't want to, right? And what's on those tablets? Occult knowledge to do with this bloodline, the knowledge of their ancestors, and symbols like the swastika and the snake. All this dragon iconography is going to be on these tablets. I mean, you talk about like going back into some of the older Freemason legends with Tubal-Cain, some of the people we've talked about tonight, Nama, Tubal-Cain, the line of Lamech, those people knew that some judgment was coming. If you read the book of the giants, it talks about how the giants were having these prophetic dreams that were giving them visions of the future. They had a sense that God was getting ready to punish them. So Tubal-Cain and that crowd, according to legend, wrote a bunch of stuff down on tablets and placed it underneath the ground, under the area where the Great Pyramids now stand. Well, that's where Cush goes to restart his line. Why did Cush go there? I think Cush, another son of Noah, went there because that's where these tablets were found that gave them the knowledge of their ancestors to begin with. And I think that's how this serpent seed survived.
Well, I mean, it's just like how God's word has been passed down, through the families and the generations. It's kind of like the same thing goes for people of the mystery schools or with this occult knowledge, right? They've been passing it down, since before the flood. And I think this is where, Boaz and what is it, Jachin or whatever? But these are the two pillars of Freemasonry, and Yes, it goes all the way back to like King Solomon's temple and stuff, but I think its root is where you had possibly Lamech and Enoch of Cain's lineage writing down, the occult and the mystery school information so that it could be ciphered.
Or even
after
the two trees. I've often postulated that if it's symbolic to them and only they know, but it's the symbolism for the two trees, the two bloodlines. And there's something that's a lot deeper too, and it ties into the story, because I know some people want to poo-poo this, and say it's malarkey, but even with all the stuff I've laid out for you, it's in the scripture. John, like I said earlier, John comes right out and says that Cain was of the wicked one. And then when you go to, I pulled this up because I knew I was going to bring it up. This was my mind blow moment. When I read this, it solidified it. It was a nail in the coffin. 2 Corinthians 11:2. So if I go, we'll go to King James. Stupid pop-up. No. So 11:2. Okay. Now this is Paul talking to the people of Corinth. He said, "For I am jealous over you with a godly jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ." Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I'm not done, but that's a sexual context. Do you three or two agree?
Oh yeah, it's pretty clear. I like what
it's a
Paul's
sexual
doing here,
context. Okay. So it says, "I've espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. But," there's the but, "I fear, lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtleties." Okay, so beguiled has a sexual connotation to it too throughout Scripture. That's the same word too that was used in the garden. Eve was beguiled. That means wholly seduced. And Paul's sitting there saying, he's talking in a sexual context. "I prepared you as a chaste virgin to one husband, but I'm afraid that you will be beguiled as Eve was beguiled by that twisting serpent." So to me, that's just, the nail in the coffin right there. But it's more than just lust. It's like you mentioned, Steve, it's Satan's game plan.
Mm-hmm.
In the very end, Revelation, we know he's hedging all of his end times bets on this seed line, because he's got an Antichrist coming. This is his best fighter that he's saving for the main event. Okay.
Right.
So if there is no line, where does this Antichrist come from? If there is no line, why did God say there'd be two seeds, her seed and his seed?
Right.
Why did they track two different genealogies and separate the two if there wasn't?
Right. Well, how about Matthew 13:24, right? You've mentioned this too in your book, getting into the wheat and the tares.
Yeah, that's what he's talking about in that parable. And so, but what I was going to say is, Satan was once like the king and priest of creation before, Adam and Eve even came along. If you go to Ezekiel 28, it says, "Every precious stone was your covering, beryl, onyx, topaz, jasper." It paints a Polaroid picture of the priestly ephod being on Satan and being his coverings. And then it says, he even defiled his sanctuary. So he had a sanctuary. And once he tried to rebel here, he was demoted. His position was then given to Adam. That's why Adam had dominion over the earth. It was taken from Satan and given to him. So basically, it's like Satan started this company and run the company, or his dad did, and his dad handed him the company to be the manager, and he managed the company for, Lord knows how long. Then all of a sudden, your dad has another son and just walks up and says, "Hey, I appreciate everything you've done, but now we're going to give it to this guy. It's his turn." Satan was like, "Hell no." So he gave dominion to humanity. So when he sown that seed into Eve, the game plan was to steal the birthright and the dominion of earth, because he wasn't human. The contract was between humanity. Humanity was given dominion. So therefore he has to intermingle and sow his seed into humanity to have a shot at getting back his company. And that's what it's all about. And that's why you see it, throughout Scripture and the seed war. That's what it's all over. It's over the dominion of earth. He wants back what was his. And I think that's what Christ is holding in Revelation. This is that scroll. That is the land deed to the dominion of earth. That's what they're fighting over.
It seems as if there's some members of this bloodline, the serpent seed line, that know this. They know their family history, and they act accordingly. You mentioned the priestly ephod there that was adorning Satan with the gems. There's a story that I came across recently where during the rebellion of Satan, he fought with the archangel Michael, and Michael took a swing at him with the sword and cut one of the gems off of his headpiece, kind of like a crown sort of a thing that he was wearing. And it's called a lapis lazuli stone, and it fell to earth. And it's kind of like the Lord of the Rings moment for this story. It's like the ring that falls down into the abyss, and later somebody comes along and finds it, and they hold the power. Well, there's said to be a remnant of that stone that the elites have, and they all the way until now, till current time, even back in I think it's the late 40s or the 50s, when Queen Elizabeth was coronated, they had that stone in a box underneath the chair that she was coronated on. I've looked into this. This is wild. They've been carrying around this stone all this time, saying this goes back to their sort of serpent father. So they do their initiation and rites of passage over that. I just think that it's interesting that you see some of these traditions, and the serpent beguiled Eve. That verse in what is it that you read there? 2 Corinthians. Yeah, I mean that's
11.
I call that a smoking gun verse. A lot of symbolism coming from there, originating from there, to do with this Satan or serpent seed. I mean, I was reading another text. It's a Jewish apocryphal text. It's called Cave of Treasures, I think. And they talk about how Satan, during this rebellion, he gets beat up pretty bad. They bring him before God, and he won't kneel, and they stab him through with a sword and make him kneel. Like he's been, I'm not trying to give any kind of sympathy for the devil here, so to speak, but they beat him up pretty bad. He deserved it. And then they threw him out of heaven. Well, he was so disfigured that, according to this text, the way he chose to sneak into the garden to get his revenge on man, because he was jealous of Adam this whole time. Adam should worship me. I was created first. It's a big part of the scuffle. The form he chose to enter the garden was a serpent. And in this text, it says that he made the serpent to fly somehow. And I just bring that up because I think this is symbolism we see through all these, on the family crests. What do you have? Dragons, flying dragons, dragons with wings, the flying serpent, some sort of a reptile with wings, right? And it all goes back to the older legends of this one being, the Hasatan.
Yeah, and that's why all these major bloodlines too point back to that. And they say, though, we come from Cain. And they say that is why we have the divine right to rule, because the birthright was Cain's. He was the firstborn. He was the eldest. Dominion and priesthood, the ephod, the crown, all that should have been Cain's. But Cain was screwed out of it, and it was given to the younger brother. So that's why they feel they have this divine right to rule, because their ancestor, where they draw their beginnings from, was the firstborn son. It should have been his. He was screwed out of his title and birthright. So they have stolen it back because they feel it was stolen from them. And you have it repeated over and over again with Jacob and Esau. Esau, the eldest, it should have been his birthright. No, God favors the younger son. And you see that over and over again. And I think it's another microcosm of the parable of, what am I looking for? The prodigal son. Did the prodigal son story, happen? Maybe. But I mean, it is a parable. It's a teaching tool. It's for, it's using allegory to talk about something else and give a message. And I think that message is what we're talking about, this seed war. And it's the battle between the two brothers. And according to Job, the angelic race was here before us. They sang for joy at the sight of creation, it said. So they are the elder brother. And we are the younger brother. And we screw up. We rode through the pig excrement. We were made lower than the elder brother. But God chooses and favors the younger son. And what happens in that story? The elder brother's pissed. He said, Father, I was here first. I've never left you. I've always been by your side. I've never soiled our family name. I've not, ruined our inheritance and the family name. But then you throw this big party for this loser of a son? Where's my party? Where's my celebration? You know what I mean? So I think that is just an overall micro narrative of the story of the Bible, our story, and the battle for the birthright between the two brothers.
That's very fascinating, man. So Tim, you mentioned, you mentioned that, right, in the battle in heaven, right, Archangel Michael is fighting Lucifer, and he hits a gemstone, right, off of his garment, or is that what you would call it? But
I think the word I was looking for was coronet. Maybe it's some sort of a head piece.
Oh, interesting. Well, I'm looking here, and just because I've been kind of digging into the subject recently, it made me think of this. But in Mecca, right, you have the black stone of Mecca, and it's like this sacred ancient stone that's embedded in the eastern corner of the Kaaba. And its Islamic tradition says that it fell from heaven to guide Adam and Eve to build the first altar. So if the connection I'm making is like this, Lucifer holding this title of being the priest over creation, falling from heaven, coming here. At least from this story, it seems, obviously it's unbiblical, but it seems like, a part of Satan's narrative is that he was here to guide mankind, right? He was here to, be shepherd over it in some sort of way. There was obviously a rebellion and a fall of Lucifer. So I don't know. I found that interesting. They worship something that has connections to a major deity in pre-Islamic Arabia, which is Hubal, which can be connected to Baal and Moloch, which would represent, the person we're talking about. So I found that interesting. I want to throw that in there.
Yeah, another thing connecting Cain to the serpent seed, and I left this part out of the story, not intentionally, but I just forgot. But according to the story, as Satan is fighting Michael, when the stone is struck from his garment or his ephod or his coronet, whatever it was, it falls to earth, and it's said that Cain got hit by a piece of the stone, like it struck him in the forehead, and it left an imprint of a serpent on his forehead, and it's symbolic of the line of Cain. And I just thought that was interesting because it ties Cain in with this serpent seed thing, among other things. Of course, there's other examples of him being connected to this, of course. And, there's a theory that it was this pre-flood sacred landscape that these guys held dominion over. And there's a real niche theory that it was Rennes-le-Château, because for a time, well, I think it's still legend there. They believe that the grave of Cain and his sons was Rennes-le-Château. And there's all this crazy stuff, lore surrounding it. Like there's 5 mountains surrounding the area, and it makes a pentagram, and there's.
Now, what is this, Tim? I've never heard this.
Yeah, where is this?
Yeah, I'll see if I can find a sound.
Rennes-le-Chateau.
Rennes-le-Chateau. This place is covered with lore. I think it's like Templar lore. And Dan Brown, that whole thing, it's all wrapped up in Rennes-le-Chateau. It's a commune in France, and it's got, endless conspiracies about this place. And I just think it's interesting because it's France. You got the Pyrenees nearby, and there's a place in the Pyrenees where Lucifer's stone was said to hit Earth, and it's still there to this day, and people still go visit it. If you're in the know, right? So I think there's all this stuff that I don't know. I just this fun lore that I like that points back to this whole situation.
Yeah.
There's going to be people screaming at this that I like, because I did such a terrible job describing Rennes-le-Chateau. It inspired the Da Vinci Code. That's just one of those type of places.
Well, I will say this too, man, that the Merovingian dynasty and that bloodline kind of talks about the same thing. They get into this idea that Jesus, and this again, some of the things like we are mentioning in the podcast, people will go, "Oh, well, that's Gnostic or this or that." Well, here's the thing. I think that that these secular groups, or even just these mystery school societies, they have taken things and used it. They've counterfeited information. It's just part of. Just look at the genealogies. I mean, even the genealogy of Cain, he's even almost naming his sons the same names as, the genealogy of Seth. My point is that Satan infiltrates and mixes up information to just throw the baby out with the bathwater. If that makes sense to anybody. I think, that's important to look at. You can't throw things out just because someone identifies with it or whatever.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, is you got to remember, there's, at least 2 warnings in Scripture about, cursed is the man who adds to or takes away from the Word of God. Okay, just like any law or rule we have in culture today, someone had to do said such thing for them to make a law. Or why? I mean, they just don't think of preemptive bad things. No, somebody does something and then they make a law against it. So theoretically speaking here, postulating, because I can't prove it, but if Satan could change, one thing, or hide, obfuscate one thing in that Bible, to me, I would think it would be this bloodline. Because you are hedging all of your end time bets on this line. Just as Christ, his line was so important to produce him, Satan's bloodline is just as important to him, because it's going to bring his Christ, the Antichrist. So I think that's why you have so much obscurity and things, taken out in context, missing, and all this other kind of stuff, because I think it was done intentionally.
Yeah. And before I said what I said, I really wanted to get into, like the Merovingian dynasty and what they claim. And they claim that basically they come from the bloodline of Christ, that Jesus Christ had a relationship with Mary Magdalene. This is probably out of, the Hagamadi, or whatever it's called, library, where they might have retrieved some of these Gnostic texts that have been hidden for a long time. I think there's a spiritual war with God and Satan, with the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then the Hagamadi library. But anyways, my point is and even Hitler, the Thule Society, and the development of families in that time, they think they come from this superior race, right? What we would call an angelic race. They have the divine right to rule, right? I mean, the Merovingians, all that stuff. Rothschilds. The development of Europe, I think has a big tie to Hitler, what he was doing, and with the ideologies that they had, that they did come from this superior race. You guys have anything to throw in with that?
I'll just say real quick that the Merovingians, being Jesus' bloodline, is contested. I definitely think it was, and I heard an echo there, so that threw me off here.
Sorry, I think there was a share screen,
but that's okay.
Or something. Not sure.
I think that's contested, but I just want to add, I think the Merovingians were definitely a part of the Cain bloodline, because that's what I found. It's like they're Scythians, and it comes through Japheth, and it goes back to, Hercules. So you get Nephilim and Cain influence in there.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
And I was the one to pull this share screen up, because that's what I've been kind of looking at over here, trying to pull this up. This was something that was new to me, and it was brought to me by JT from JT Follows JC. I did an episode with him on the book, and he brought this up to me, and it totally blew my mind, and it's relevant to what we're talking about today. I was wanting to play this little reel for you.
I think you might enjoy this.
The name Rothschild is deeply meaningful when translated into Hebrew. Perhaps the German Jewish name Rothschild is directly transliterated into Hebrew letter by letter to mimic its sound, rather than translated into Hebrew word by word to convey its hidden meaning, because the correct Hebrew translation of the German word Rothschild is Magen Edom, meaning shield of the Edomites, nation of Edom descended from Esau, Jacob's evil twin. The name Edom is composed of the word Adam, Aleph, Dalet, Mem, plus the serpent letter Vav, which is a pictogram of a snake. The Hebrew word Edom signifies the joining of the holy bloodline of Eve with the satanic seed of the serpent through their son Cain by adding a snake, a Vav, to the name Adam, to graphically and cryptically portray Judaism's secret doctrine.
Welcome to an epic journey. This.
That blew my mind.
It's wild.
Show me that.
That's wild, dude. That's crazy. Who you made that? You made that short? That was you?
Yeah, he showed me that video on his program that I done with him, and I just took that and made a reel out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Edom, right?
Oh yeah, and Stephen, you talked about this, and maybe it was before the show. You talked about the beginnings of a religion known as Islam, right? And we don't have to get into all that today, but I think that that's closely intertwined with some of the stuff we're talking about today. The pre-Meccan moon god Hallel, arguably a Hallel that's mentioned in Isaiah 14. This is something they've worked really hard to scrub from. You don't hear much about this entity, but it was a part of the history in that region. It's just been obfuscated, to use Doc's word from earlier. A lot of this stuff has been obfuscated. This serpent seed. It took me until late in life to figure out that this was a thing. So that's why I get on shows like this, and I'm sort of like nerding out about some of this lore, because this is all new to me, man. I'm just like, whoa, everything just points back to this serpent seed. Everything points back to, if not specifically that, the Nephilim, the Genesis 6 event, the Watchers coming to earth and taking for themselves wives. They saw they were comely, and they had these children, and they're the Nephilim, and we're still feeling the ripples of that throughout history, even after a flood wiped everything out. It still survives. This is the craziest movie ever, and we're part of it. We're living it. It's a part of the spiritual realm that we're in, and we're at war with this seed. We're Eve's children, in Genesis 3:15. We are Eve's children, and alongside of us, battling with us, is the serpent seed, and we're here for the ride. It's something else. It's
Yeah. Well,
something else.
how about when Jesus tells the Pharisees, like, you're of your father, the devil, right? And then in Revelation chapter 2, I believe it is, where he's referring to the Jews that claim themselves to be Jews but are not, that are lying. And when we look at the Talmud,
the lying pens of the scribes.
Yeah, exactly. It's like who wants to switch the narrative for their benefit, and you can see that in Talmud, obviously, with just the goyim, right? I mean, they believe that they have this royalty, that we are to serve them. And with that same idea, if you make those connections with who their father is, and again, I'm talking about Jews that are not Jews, okay, that are claiming to be Jews. So I find that fascinating, man. And again, it's a spiritual war, like Tim is saying. And on top of that, I think it's also part of the physical. I think we're at war with these physical bloodlines.
Oh yeah, and it brings to life. You mentioned it earlier. Is the story of the wheat and tares? Proverbs tells you it is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but it is the glory of kings to search things out. He's not going to read between the lines and spell it out for you. He leaves it there for you to investigate and find. If you seek it out, you're going to find it. It says, if you knock, the door will be answered. You seek and ye shall find. Jesus taught in parables. Okay? He hid stuff in other stories for the people that seeked it out to find. And he'd even tell his disciples. They'd be like, Rabbi, what was the meaning of this teaching? He said, to them the mysteries have not been given. So I speak to them in parables. But to you the mysteries have been given, but you still ask me, Rabbi, Rabbi. And he had to explain the meaning to them. But in that wheat and tares, God, sows good seed, walks away, and then his farm hands, the angelic race, the watchers, the good ones, notice that there's tares growing amongst the wheat. And he says, Father, did you not sow good seed? But behold, there's tares growing amongst the wheat. And what does he say? The enemy has done this in my absence. And they said, oh, well, do you want us to pull up the tares then? No. Let them grow together. Lest in pulling up the wheat, you destroy the tares. So let them grow together, and come harvest time, we will gather up the tares and throw them into the fire. He said, and we'll gather the wheat into my barn. And to use that story you talked about with the Pharisees, he comes right out and says it. You're a den of vipers, and you are of your father, the devil, who was a murderer from the beginning. Okay? It's talking about Cain. Cain's the context. His father was Satan also. And so they're talking about genealogies, and a lot of people stop there. But if you keep going, get some more context. They reply to Jesus' remark about them being a brood of vipers and being of the devil, the line of Cain. They reply with, we were not born of fornication. In my parentheses there, like Cain was. Okay? And it says, we were not born of fornication, but we have but one Father. So they're talking about this seed war. They're talking about these two genealogies, and they're sitting there trying to claim they're the seed of Abraham. But Jesus is saying, no, you're of your father, the devil, who was a murderer from the beginning, talking about Cain. And then they reply, oh, we weren't born of fornication, because they knew and believed back then that Eve had two seeds.
Yeah. you said something earlier. It's hidden. This, for the most part, this information is it's been hidden. It's for us to seek out, and it's for us to find. But if it doesn't take long once you start looking to find things, and you have these members of this line of Cain who tell you that this is real as well, and that they are indeed of this line, the line of Cain. They'll come out and say it. One of those guys that was reading up on some of this dragon court stuff, secret societies of this bloodline, and it gets into the work of Nicholas DeVere. I know Doc knows about this guy. I probably heard about him first from Doc, or at least Doc mentioning it. And I found a thing about this, and I might read some of this just to paint the picture and maybe get Doc's thoughts on it and your thoughts on it, Stephen.
That's what I was on the way to get.
Nice. So I found this post, and we can dissect this, but I don't know that it's 100% right. I'll read some of it though, because it paints a picture. It says the reptilian conspiracies can arguably be traced to the ancient dragon clans, though certainly based in esoteric knowledge and steeped in secrecy. The connections that can be drawn are thought-provoking in the least. A few decades ago, a man by the name of Nicholas DeVere stepped forward as a royal prince of the dragon courts and head of the dragon clans. And by the way, DeVere is a name from history. Like, this was a real bloodline. And that's his last name kind of does confirm that. It says he, to some extent, began to shed light on the royal dragon lineage he represented. There are multiple sites affiliated with the various dragon families, some of them being restricted to the families themselves. As with any similar dynasty, some members took exception with the spotlight. Unlike most similar dynasties, there's some evidence supporting the claim that the dragon lineages aren't wholly human. So, and this goes on. I don't want to just read and take up a big chunk of space reading, but this gets into the Grail bloodlines, the 2000 BC 12th dynasty of ancient Egypt,
right.
The former alchemists known as Thoth, Hermes, the Scythian kings, the Tuatha De Danann, the little people, the fairy folk, the Fae, the Davidic house of Judah, which like I said, I think that's contestable or contested. The Merovingians, of course. So most, if not all, of the royal bloodlines can be traced to this family line.
Right, dude. It's wild, man. And when you kind of track down the etymology of some of these words, right, like the dragon going back to the serpent, fairy going back to fate, you can see kind of more of maybe the meaning, that they're trying to carry with the bloodline, right? Like that they believe that it's their fate, or the fact that they have this connection with this serpent. I think it's a serpent spirit right now, but obviously it goes all the way back to the things that we're talking about. It looks like Doc's got his camera angle back. Let's go.
Dude, I don't know. That thing just went plumb retarded on me.
It's like Riverside sometimes will choose an input for you if something, maybe after a screen share or whatever. But, to what Tim was saying.
Oh, yeah.
That's all European. Right?
Oh, yeah.
For the most part, but it traces back to Canaanite, Phoenician. Forgot the other one. Maybe.
Oh, I stopped. I stopped reading before it got into the Anunnaki. So yeah, they're saying it goes all the way back. Pre-Sumer. Pre-Sumer. Yeah.
Gotcha. Now you're killing it, dude. That dragon fairy stuff is it's wild, and it makes me just think of the royalty that's there now, right? Like they've got crescents and they've got coat of arms that, kind of resemble the dragon.
Okay, here you go. These families claim their heritage stretches back to mingle with the fabled Anunnaki gods of ancient Sumer. This is where the time before humans claims to come in. Pixies and other specific otherworldly beings can be traced back to these bloodlines and the knowledge they held. Most European monster myths can be argued to have grown from the dragon court practices. City, or the Shining Ones, share a name with the dragon elect. El as an Elohim, and El Adonai literally translates to shining one, and Messiah translates to anointed one. I don't know if that really has a place in this, but maybe. But anyway, the Dragon Court cite rituals where their members were anointed. Okay, I see where they're going with that. With the fat of the crocodile in honor of the god Sobek. So, yeah, I mean, this gets in the weeds, right? I mean, this is... they're taking just about every myth they can get their hands on and finding that it somehow traces its way back to this thing.
Yeah. Well, even I think when you break down the word royale, it's actually throwing in the meaning of angel, right? Like El, royale, El. I think I've heard Gary Wayne get into that, and AT talks about that, and royalty and all this kind of stuff.
And there was a Canaanite deity,
Rex Dios,
right? Exactly. It's almost like the Da Vinci Code. You guys watched the Da Vinci Code before? It's kind of
that's
like
what he was talking. He mentioned it earlier. What's his name again?
Dan Brown.
Dan Brown.
Yeah. I would say that Rex Diaz, I've heard that guy before. I think he passed away, but the guy who was talking about that, the Dan Brown stuff ties directly into this Rennes Chateau, where in the area of this portion of France, they say this was Cain's grave, literally where he was buried.
That's wild. That's wild.
You know, this is like an all roads lead to Rome scenario, except replace Rome with Cain, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's what we're dealing with here.
What you got there, Doc? Look at that thing.
I talked with Gary Wayne a while back, and we were talking about this same stuff, and I pulled out a book and was reading something that was related to this and wanted his opinion. And I thought it was in the Dragon Legacy, but I couldn't find it in there. So I was like, well, maybe it was in Morals and Dogma. So I was trying to find it.
No, little Albert Pike.
Well, to top off real quick, like the Bloodline thing, not to top it off, but to add to it, where I was reading something out of Tom Horn's book. I forget which one it was exactly. But in there, I remember a quote that came out of Manly P. Hall's book, Secret Destiny of America. And I think since we're talking about these bloodlines, we need to look at some of the architecture that's prominent in the world, Washington, D.C., the Vatican, and places like this, where they are showing you the mysteries and the rituals that they do, right, with the dome and the obelisk. I think there's something to that, right? Like they're showing you who their Trinity is. Getting into like the Vatican and the painting of Michelangelo, I think it's Michelangelo, and it's where there's a painting of Adam touching God's hand. God has his arm wrapped around a woman, and the woman, and God is with his arm wrapped around the woman is touching the sun, which is I think it stems back to ancient Babylon. I think it gets back to like that. The parent gods that kind of like we were talking about, that whole framework, and it gets into Nimrod, Semiramis, Tammuz worship. But I think what we can see is, possibly that, Satan wanted Cain to rule, right? But God still had authority to dictate who he's going to bless. So I think with these bloodlines, they are carrying that tradition on so that when there is a supernatural man that comes into this world, which Manly P. Hall talks about, that comes from this bloodline and is going to have supernatural abilities and powers, and that his destiny is to rule in America, with Washington, D.C., set up with the Osiris ritual. It's wrapped around all that stuff. And I think that those two places, Vatican or Washington, D.C., could be prominent areas for the future of what the Nephilim and Genesis 6 conspiracy gets into, that they bring revelation, like they're a big part of revelation.
I mean, they certainly encoded all this into the halls, walls, and murals and monuments of DC. I mean, whole shows can be done on that. You mentioned a list of beings or entities and little g parent gods that are shown in DC. I mean, literally, there's probably not a bottom to the list, but Baal's another one I came across. There's depictions of Baal with this guy with the corn cobs in his hair, and his symbolism with Baal there, and a lot of others, like the goddess symbolism, of course, is off the chain. But to something you said there, Stephen, I was reading about this belief that the Merovingians had. Again, line of Japheth, Scythians. Think it goes back to this line of Cain. The Merovingians believed that they were to become these divine rulers at the end of the world, for lack of a better way of putting it. One day, it's almost like it's a destiny thing, right? Like a secret destiny. If we get into Manly P. Hall's stuff, the secret destiny of ruling a philosophical utopian occult empire type of stuff. That's what the Merovingians held. And a lot of these Merovingians and others, they go back to the same family. That's what I'm finding. So it's not just Merovingians, right? My point is, it's like we could throw like Queen Elizabeth, King Charles into this, who, by the way, they trace their bloodlines through the Earl of Cambridge back to Muslim Spain. So we're back at this Muslim thread that keeps popping up today, right? They trace it back, I think it's like 43 generations to Fatima, which was Muhammad the Prophet's daughter, right? And he named her after a goddess named Fatima, by the way. Getting into these pre-Muslim world gods that were sort of, you don't hear much about. Well, he named her after one of them. And but anyway, Queen Elizabeth is in Muhammad's bloodline. It goes through the kings of Seville, if I remember correctly. And of course, Muhammad creates Islam, and Fatima is this pre-Muslim Arabic goddess. So this is all part of this bloodline. And I think to bring it all together, if I can, it's like, yeah, it's not just the past and this history of their blood that they're sort of obsessed with. It's going somewhere too. It's like there's a future date in mind, I think, where they're going to reclaim all this stuff and really, really rule again. But again, like back to something I was saying earlier, this war, like there's a spiritual war happening here, and I think this plays right into it, because these people are still ruling in the earth today. They still have a lot of power in the earth today. It's very much still an us versus them situation. You're muted there, bud.
Thank you, brother. You know what I'm wondering, man, is if these bloodlines are responsible for developing the beast system, developing this kingdom here in this world for their God, which is an exact counterfeit of how we are to be with God in His kingdom, right? And I think that there's a false millennial reign that's incoming, and I think that the bloodlines, the secret societies, they're prepared, promised, and ready for this millennial kingdom to come in. And I've heard this talked about by Satanists and some Freemasons who are super, super mystic. And people in the secret societies don't all have the same opinion. It's kind of like they have their own rituals, right? Or they might go about something in a different way, maybe a different philosophy or something. But I do think that through these bloodlines, the New World Order will be established, because if you look at how Satan, the Antichrist, whatever, comes into power, the kings of the earth give him his power. They turn it into him. I feel like it would be a part of Satan's strategy to have his bloodlines in those positions and to make it an easier pass to get him into this world through some sort of apotheosis ritual or whatever. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it's just a going back to like Atlantis. I take the opinion that Atlantis was an allegory for the pre-flood world as a whole, because you have these 10 kings. They were Nephilim, and they had this, supernatural abilities and technology, and those 10 kings ruled over the entire world. They had the dominion, but then the flood came and wiped them out. So I think this whole book of Revelation is trying to come full circle, trying to get back what they had that was taken from them. The family had the divine right to rule, and these 10 heads of different families ruled together jointly in this one world system, this new world order. And the father, the Hasatan, was at the center. And these were all his nieces and nephews, his family line, ruling it all. And even the scripture tells you Satan is the ruler of this world. But we see when Jesus came into the throne room at the right hand of God, he took the scroll, he took the land deed, he took dominion back away from the Hasatan. So he's fighting to try to get that back and insert his bloodline, his 10 kings back again for this new world order, this one world government, this one world religion, to try to return back to the pre-flood world, the allegory of Atlantis. And sorry it took so long. I was digging through both of these books trying to find that passage, and I could not find it. I just gave up.
Yeah,
it was cool. Take my word for it.
Yeah, I've heard you, talk about him before, and Nicholas DeVere, that is, and he's just one of these guys. He's out there, and a lot of what he says, take it with a grain of salt, because he is a through and through occultist, and he gets kind of weird with it. But also, he does confirm a lot of things that we're talking about. He is, after all, a DeVere. This is really his family, so he has some podium to speak on when it comes to this sort of thing. And Prince Charles, this is very real. That's why I'm bringing up these modern names. Prince Charles, Order of the Dragon, this is like an order that I think is a high echelon elitist order of them getting together and saying, yeah, we still have this blood running through our veins. This is us. This is our heritage. This is our history, and we want to maintain this and continue this. And this is where you get into Transylvania and Vlad Dracu. Vlad the Impaler's dad was Vlad Dracu, and he named himself Dracu because it means Vlad the Dragon. He was in this Order of the Dragon as well. These guys were royals. They didn't have lives like us. These guys lived in castles and stuff and ruled over people. Like, this was a way for them to get together and have a boys club centered on their Hasatan daddy, right? Centered around their ties to Cain even. And, you get crazy reputations for these guys too. Vlad the Impaler, he's a part of this, or the Dragon. This is, again, Scythian stuff. This is what I've been finding. It goes back to the Scythians. You could trace it back through Japheth. All comes out of Mount Ararat with Noah and his 3 sons. And they're descendants of the Scythians. The Huns are descendants of the Scythians. The Queen of Hungary was involved with the formation of this Order of the Dragon in 1408. So this predates Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism even. And ties in with like the cross of St. George. They were using that as a symbol, ties in with the Templars. So I just think it's interesting that you got this. I didn't mention this guy yet, but Sigismund, he was like a Holy Roman Emperor who helped found this. This guy's supposed to be associated with the Catholic Church. He's one of the guys that starts the Order of the Dragon with Queen Barbara of Hungary. So I don't know, just they tie their stuff back to Melusine. A lot more of this parent god stuff going on there, like Melusine and Hercules, and it's all in the family tree.
Yeah. And Medusa, she was that famous priestess. She was a Scythian. And she was known in all the writings to be a Christ. She was Christed, anointed according to their writings and stuff. And that all stems from that land and region anyway. And I've often theorized if, she wasn't the lady in scarlet on the dragon. And when you get into the Greek, it says that she has her cup, and the English says abominations. But when you go into the Greek, it says she has her cup filled with porneia. So it's talking about sexual again, coming full circle again. But I recently had Tim Cohen on the show, which it'll probably be a month before it comes out for my backlog. But he wrote a book on the Antichrist and the end, Book of Revelation, end times prophecy type stuff. And he theorized and laid out a lot of evidence and points to Charles. And so you'd mentioned him, and it kind of sparked in my head. He thinks Charles is the Antichrist. And he took his name and put it in gematria, come out to 666, and then he even took his previous title. I can't remember what it was, but ran it through gematria. It was 666. He showed the painting, had the Baphomet in there when you mirror image that thing, and he brought up just all kinds of stuff that he made a pretty compelling argument. I mean, I ain't saying that, it is what it is, but I mean, he raises some pretty compelling arguments to King, not Prince Charles, he's a king now, but King Charles being the Antichrist.
Oh, let me add this too. The part of this family, King Charles, of course, traces his bloodline back to Vlad the Impaler. And I was just online looking at Vlad's tomb. You can go visit it. So there's a lot of pictures of it. And this serpent iconography was plastered all over this tomb. But something that I want to ask you guys about, I don't know if you saw this or if you remember this, but Queen Elizabeth, the one who just passed away, right? She's the one who is one of the last known rulers who was coronated on this lapis lazuli stone that's said to have come off of basically Satan's ephod, right? She died recently, and there was a televised event about her funeral, and there was a voice that came through in the live account of this. It was like some guy reporting, like, "Oh, it's a beautiful day in the Abbey," and they were getting ready to cover the funeral, and this voice comes in, and it's real creepy. It's very proper sounding, and this lady comes in and says, "She's not dead." Or no, she says, "She's not dead, she's trapped." And it's just real creepy. I didn't know if you guys heard that, but it's sounds like some witchy
She's
stuff.
trapped?
Trapped, yeah. Like she's not dead, she's trapped.
Yeah, since we're talking about like the royalty and everything and Queen Elizabeth, this was back in, and maybe this was just them flashing something at us, and if you know, if you don't know, you're going to remain ignorant. Where Queen Elizabeth lights the Platinum Jubilee beacon with help from grandson Prince William, and this beacon, when they lit it up, it was a big DNA strand that led to a tree. So are they saying something, right? Are they saying their DNA tracks back to the tree, right? The tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? So
yeah,
I don't know. That's something to think about. Didn't think of it.
And why did they raise so much hell over Meghan?
Yeah.
Because she wasn't of that family tree that they wanted to keep preserved and that bloodline pure. And whether it's right, wrong, or whatever, they believe it. And they're the rulers of this world. They're the ones with all the money. They're the ones in the power positions, pulling all the strings, making all the decisions. And at the very least, we need to read and understand what they believe, whether it's true or not, because they believe it. And if they believe it, that's all that matters, because they're the ones with the money and the power positions making all the decisions, folks. But, yeah. I was going to say something else, but I totally had a brain fart.
One thing about Prince Charles, too, is back in 2022, he was giving a speech at the COP26. And obviously, we know the times we were just kind of getting out of a tough era, right? And he's at the COP26 convention or whatever it is, and he's up there and he's talking, which it's the climate change assembly of nations and stuff. This was in Geneva, Switzerland, and he's talking, and he's the only person that in this world, in my time that I'm alive, that I've heard reference something as close to the Antichrist as you can get. And when he's giving this speech, he's talking about that there will be, that there's someone out there that has the utmost respect of all the world rulers and leaders and kings, and has the more GDP than all the nations combined. And then he referenced it as an it. So it was a he and then an it. When he's talking about this person who's to come and hopefully marshal a military style campaign to fight against climate change, which maybe can fit, the first seal, the rider on the white horse, conquering and the conqueror. I don't know. But I found that interesting, that he was the only person I've ever heard, identify someone that's going to help save the world through power and money and all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like the milieu today who's trying to seize control at every turn, globally. It's these people obsessed with climate change. World Economic Forum, who does organizations, any of your, like, your city-state, like CERN is a city-state, Vatican, city-state London, the banking section of London, which is on DC,
District of Columbia,
the dove, the dove of Ishtar,
with the fertility god. I did not know that till I talked with the headless giant. He come on the show and did fertility rites in plain sight in the USA, and he had told me that a lot of the female imagery, like on top of the dome of the Capitol and all this kind of stuff, is Columbia. And even like the movies when we were kids, you remember that it showed that woman that looked like the Statue of Liberty with the flame and stuff. Columbia Pictures. It was talking about that goddess.
Right.
And that totally blew my mind. I never knew that.
Yeah. District of Columbia. When I looked into it, it was goddess worship. The dove of Ishtar. If you look back at some of the old reliefs of Aphrodite, Inanna, Ishtar, there's often a dove nearby. And that's Columbia, the dove, or Columbia.
I almost think, too, when this country first started with the 13 colonies, what do you guys think of that? You think this was the 13 bloodlines, right? Like, was this country a safe haven or a promised land for this bloodline?
It was meant to be, I think. That was their intention, because they wanted to get out under the finger of the Roman Catholic Church and under the, out of the watchful eye, because, during the Renaissance and the Enlightenment period, Newton, and all these other guys, Copernicus, and all these guys were coming up with all these, scientific new agey ideas and philosophies, and they were getting suppressed and murdered, burned at the stake for heresy and all this kind of stuff. So they ended up making these secret societies and stuff. That way they could do what they wanted under secrecy, but they had to keep watching over their back and paranoid. So yeah, when they took off to this new world, it's like we're thousands of miles away from Rome and the Pope now. So now we can start doing what we want to do. And I think that's why you have all this, deitist type stuff and imagery all through the Capitol and everything else, because they were Christian only in outer appearance, in my opinion. They claimed to believe in God, but what God? They never come out and says Yahweh. And like Jefferson, everybody wants to say, oh, well, Jefferson, he was a Christian. He made the Jefferson Bible. Well, yeah, folks, have you ever looked up and seen the contents of that Bible?
It's pretty bad.
Everything pointing to Christ as the Son of God, removed. Anything that has miracles and miraculous type healings and things like that, removed, because it was all above their reasoning. They thought reason ruled. They even put the goddess of reason on a throne during the French Revolution. and those guys were tied right into that. So, yeah, they were only Christian in outer appearance. That they were really deitists. Yeah, they believed in a God, but it was like the Freemasons. It was a grand architect, and Jesus was not the Son of God. There was letters between him and Jefferson and all these different guys that said that it was blasphemy, obscene.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it said that anybody that believes that, you know, Christ was the Son of God and died for our sins and we get salvation through faith is blasphemy, obscene.
Mm-hmm.
Wild, man.
Yeah, and you know, we're talking about Queen Elizabeth some today. It was one of the past Queen Elizabeths who I think had a hand in creating this nation, and secretly, quietly through secret societies. Arguably, her son was Francis Bacon, who wrote New Atlantis. Who, I'll tell you right now, these guys who founded this country were way more concerned with reading New Atlantis than they were with the Bible. That goes for Jefferson, Franklin, and Washington. That is about sort of moving spirituality to the side and letting science take over. Their version of science, of course, at the time. He's writing this in the 1500s as he helps create the Royal Society. So this is all things to come, but they wanted to create this a priestcraft of scientists who kind of run the thing. It's like running the few, or the few running the many. Guardians of the Republic from Plato. They were drawing heavily from the Greeks with this. And they wanted to have these scientific priest kings, this panel of experts run everything. That's the utopian paradise that's presented in New Atlantis that all these guys were following. And it comes out of Queen Elizabeth's court. And all these other guys do as well who were coming over here. Francis Bacon was involved in creating the country with the Virginia colony. And like I said, this is quiet, but you had Sir Thomas Gates over here. He was the first governor of Jamestown. You had Sir Walter Raleigh, who was coming over here and allegedly looking for ley lines to put cities on. So this court was very much involved with creating this country. And it's just one aspect of how it wasn't Christian methodology that they were concerned with.
Mm. Yeah, it's when we're getting into this topic, all that keeps popping out to me is like these, you know, how Satan just counterfeits stuff. How this country was found, I feel like it was the similar tactics that the Templars did in Jerusalem, using that religion of the people, using the beliefs of the people, to influence them and to manipulate them.
Trojan horse,
right? Like the Templars, right? They obviously weren't Christian, right? They were occultists with a kind of, you know, Christian. I don't know. It's like they
icing.
like a little Christian hat on or something, right?
Gnostic.
But you know, they started the banking system, right? Like they're responsible for a big part of that. If they didn't come in with this idea of merging religion and politics together, no one would have funded them. No one would have, partook in the banking, and they wouldn't have had, the empire that they had. I see the same thing with America and these founding fathers, that they played the same strategy, right? They used Christianity, the religion of the land, to have the support of the people. And I think that's what this bloodline is going to do. I think when you
Jews who say they are not, or say they are but are not, you know what I mean? That's
exactly
what they do. They pose.
Yeah. And that's what's going to be a part of Revelation, in my opinion. I think that when we're looking at the harlot, right, I think we're looking at a religious system. And I think that it could possibly even represent the church. When you look at the ancient stories of Marduk fighting Tiamat, and then you've got Baal fighting Yam, and you've got Zeus fighting so-and-so, there's like this ancient story of a battle between these two beings that hold divinity. They're gods. And I think that what the Babylonians did, which again, if we're talking about the same strategy that the Knights Templar did, that the founding fathers of America did, the Babylonians did the same thing. And I think that that's what Satan's trying to do, is he's trying to counterfeit Christianity. It's not going to be the same thing. It'll be different, but he's trying to be like the Most High. I think the Babylonians, you know, when you're getting into the Enuma Elish, you can line up Genesis with the Enuma Elish, and it's parallel. But what the Babylonians did is they put Satan in the identity of God, which would be like Marduk, this figure that, you know, established creation and you know, fought a battle. It induces a Gnostic religion that is snuck in, and if you don't have the discernment to see it, then you're going to kind of fall into it too. It's like when God's always like, "Hey, come out of Babylon, my people." It's like Abraham when he was in Ur. You know, there was a religion there, but God took him out of it, because I think God knew that Satan counterfeited the system, right?
Mhm.
He needs to take his portion and to get it right over here. I don't know. I think that's a big part of the meta narrative of things that we're getting into, and
yeah. And you even have the garments in that legend, I do believe, because when you have that story, Marduk just appears out of nowhere. He's the son that agrees to fight this monster that nobody else wants to. And he says, you know, I will do this, but just like Satan, he wants to be the Most High. He said, I'll do this, but you're just going to make me your king. You're going to put me above it all if I do this thing. And they're like, oh, fine, just do it. And it mentions Tiamat created from the blood of her, I think it was the blood of her dead husband, I think. But she made this monstrous king of her own called Kingu. And it says that she bestowed upon him, this dragon bestowed upon him, the tablets of destiny. Okay? And it says that after they fight, Marduk defeats Tiamat and takes Kingu as like slave, you know, drags him behind in chains, you know, taunting him around. And that it says in there in that story that the first act of business, you know, after he drags him in front of the other gods and belittles him and all that kind of stuff, takes his victory lap, it says that then he takes the tablets of destiny. And I can't remember the exact terminology, but it basically, it didn't just say he just took them. It says he took them because they were not his, or Kingu was not worthy. Basically, you know, the birthright wasn't his. He wasn't the ruler. This guy was the rightful ruler. So therefore, he's taking the tablets of destiny, which I think is the breastplate, the ephod, the multicolored stone, you know, that according to the Jewish legends and traditions that, you know, the garments that were given to Adam at Eve, or at the Garden of Eden, was the coverings of the Nakash, which Ezekiel 28 paints the picture. It's the priestly ephod. So it's the king, it's a symbol of kingship and priesthood. I think that in that legend there, that Babylonian legend, you have the garments woven in, but they just call it the tablets of destiny, because I think they're referring to maybe the breastplate.
Yeah, you know, in talking about some of these stories today, and I'm thinking about the one that I read in the Jewish apocryphal text, talking about how Satan entered the garden and he used this flying serpent like an avatar. And I see that being a possible origin story for all this iconography that these people brandish to this day. But it might go back further than that to this Tiamat chaos dragon thing. The serpent iconography, again, to use that word, might just go all the way back to the beginning, to Tiamat and the dragon. And I think if that's the case, you're seeing this thing is thorough in that it's a dragon at the beginning and it's going to be a dragon at the end. back to Revelation and all that. And I don't know. Antichrist. Yeah, go ahead. Somebody's.
Yeah, no. So, and again, please tell me if this is confusing, because I'm trying to get better at getting this message across with, the mystery of the Chaldeans and ancient Babylon and Marduk and his consort, and then his son Nebo. And then you have the same worship taken with now the king and queen of Babylon, with Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. When we get into the Enuma Elish, again, like how I said, everything Marduk did, right, parallels with Genesis in some sort of way. It's not exact, but it parallels with it. And I think what that bloodline did, right, was take their god and put it in place of the title of Marduk, right? So they took Satan and they made him Marduk, and then they made God Tiamat, right? They made God Tiamat because now he's the adversary. It's like this was the development of like this Gnostic view, right?
Yeah.
Where things are switched up. The players are switched up to make Satan look like the good guy. And I think how that's done is by merging politics, power, rule, and religion. And I think today we can maybe see a parallel with that with Christianity and where it's at, especially with the 7 Mountain Mandate and how it's involved in politics now, how the charismatic church and the New Apostolic Reformation is pushing to be more involved in politics. But then on top of that, their 7 Mountain Mandate is to take over the world, with religion being the number one thing of their infrastructure, along with education and all kinds of other stuff. But they're to make Christianity globally accepted, and like this, it honestly sounds like this is the religion they want to take over the whole world, right? So I don't know. I'm seeing some things line up, because if I take the concept of Marduk and that Satan's in that position now, but it's the title of God pertaining, if you compare Genesis and the Enuma Elish with the creation aspect, are they setting up the stage for a Christ character that's going to come and deceive the church, right? Like that's what I think is in development. But
yeah, a savior. Someone's going to come out and save them, just like Marduk did. And you talked about, inversions. That's what Satan does. That's his MO. I think that's what happened with the whole Jacob and Esau. Mm-hmm. I think Esau was a serpent seed. And what did he do? He knew that prophecy that just happened a few verses up in Genesis 3:15, that his seed was going to be cursed, and the head of his seed was going to be bruised by the seed of the woman. Mm-hmm. So what did he do? I think he reached out in that womb and flipped them around to where his seed come out first, reversing and inverting the prophecy. But God is playing 12D chess while Satan's playing checkers. He sent the angel to go tell her ahead of time. He's like, hey, the younger is the one going to get the birthright. So one will be stronger than the other, but the younger is going to rule over the older, because, in parentheses, we already know what Satan's going to do. So here's the game plan.
Right. Yeah, man.
Yeah. Here's a post I found about Marduk. According to the Sumerian mythology and Enuma Elish, Marduk was the god who defeated the Ancient Ones long before the creation of matter as we know it. Against him in the battle were the fierce Tiamat, Kingu, and Azog-Thoth. Once he had destroyed these demons, he created the universe from the flesh of Tiamat, and humanity from the blood of Kingu mixed with his own breath. The 50 names were given to Marduk by the elder gods after he had helped them to defeat these Ancient Ones. And then this is what this person says here who's writing this. This is nothing less than the biblical story of the war in heaven and the fall of Lucifer. And I certainly see the parallels. Okay. And I mean, him creating the universe from the flesh of Tiamat, that part of this myth is interesting to me because of, if you get into the idea that was a planet. and God destroyed this planet and created the earth out of it. There's some stuff there. We don't have to get into all that, but
yeah, it's fascinating, man.
yeah.
It is.
Well.
What's interesting too is Marduk defeated Tiamat with a bow and with wind, right? And I think maybe there's some connections with the rider on the white horse, the first seal, right? Has a crown and a bow. So I don't know if there's a connection with that, because that seal is supposed to represent the Antichrist. But maybe in the secular view or the worldly view, that obviously this would be a warrior that's to help and save humanity. It's just
I think, yeah, man, I think this is interesting too once you get to this part where it says there were 50 names given to Marduk. Because I see that when you're talking about these little G's, it's like there's like a real small group of them, but they all have many names. I think you see many names of Ishtar. When I've looked into this goddess thing, the divine feminine thing, she just keeps showing up under a different name throughout history. I think that's a calling card of these entities.
Yeah.
And even with the Genesis account, you have the I can't remember what people group it is, but it's the story of well, no, it's the same story. Yam instead of Tiamat. Same story, just different, caveats and names. But that is the cognate to the word for waters in Genesis. So it's kind of like they did like a catty word play, like, in your face kind of thing there, where it said, that God hovered over the Tehom, and that's I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Tiamat, Tehom and Tiamat, they share the same cognate word. And so his spirit hovered over the Tehom, the deep, over Tiamat. And what's funny, I love Derek Gilbert, his book, what was it? Last Clash of the Titans. Great book. But in there, he said that it's funny how all the other religions of that world, their creation story, whether if it's Baal Haman or Marduk or whoever, they all struggle to subdue this chaos. I mean, they have to go get special magic incantations. Baal has to have these special clubs made, and Marduk has to have, this bow of destiny and just all these other things to combat this chaos, and they still struggle. But then, God paints his story where he just walks up and is like, I think Derek said he's like, down boy. He subdues chaos with the flick of his finger, where the other guys had to struggle.
Yeah, the one thing. Go ahead, Sam. I'll come in after.
Just real quick, I just want to say, and I won't go into an exegesis on this, but I think from my studies that Tiamat was a chaos dragon, a planet, possibly a water planet, like a water world, and for lack of a better term, principality over that planet. I think it was three.
Yeah.
It was three things.
This is fascinating stuff. I mean, because we've all had Doug Elwell on the show. He kind of gets into this idea. Because there's the gap theory, and then there's certain other ways to interpret what was going on. Maybe it would be a show we can all do in the future and all that. We're getting to a time where we could start wrapping it up. I wanted to mention this since we were talking about Baal and Moloch and all of that. There's been sacrifices to these deities for thousands of years, and it hit me the other day, and I was like, "Wow, how Satan!" I beat this with I hit on this too much, but Satan counterfeits things in such a way, and Baal. The families would sacrifice their child to the fires of Moloch or the hands of Baal, whatever. And out of this, they would get fortune. They would get enlightenment. I've even read some things where it almost describes like a Kundalini awakening moment for some of these people, and they're able to get in touch with their divine spark, right? Gnosticism, and able to get wisdom from this. And with all of that stuff, I think it leads to a false eternal life or some sort of salvation. But look at what God did. Like, Baal wants you to sacrifice your son or your daughter. But God
Amen.
sent his son and he became the sacrifice for
God
us.
for you.
You see what I'm saying? So, and this is the spiritual war that we're up against, man. And I just wanted to get that out there. I think it's important for people to understand the nature of what's going on. So, but guys, this was an awesome show. Let's take a couple of minutes here. If there's anything you guys wanted to, wrap a bow on top of anything you guys wanted to get into, if there's any last message you guys wanted to share, we can chop it up a little bit right now and then we'll close out.
Oh, just while it's on my mind, something you said there, talking about the nature of the Moloch sacrifice, the Baal sacrifice. Both entities, by the way, both beings, I looked into it. They were both little g gods that are mentioned in the Bible there that people were sacrificing to. And it reminds me of these modern stories of you hear about these sacrifices these people make for fame, for money, for power. Oftentimes somebody real close to them will die or get pushed off a building right before they become famous. And it's always reminded me of these old sacrifices to go along with something you were saying there, Stephen.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's just look at the Epstein stuff. I don't know if anyone's ever, or if anyone's dug into it. It's ancient stuff, man. It's ancient stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's little g gods. There's principalities and powers that we're up against, that a part of this world works with. So it's real.
Yeah. Another thing I guess I'd cap this off with is the overall story of the Bible, the parables. They all have the micro narratives, folks. If you look at them, like we talked about today, we are in a seed war. There's two bloodlines competing. One injected its seed to try to be nefarious and subdue and take over and abuse humanity. And another one inserted his gene to set us all free. And if you go to the accusation of Joshua in the Old Testament, where Satan accuses the high priest, it says that Satan is standing at the right hand of the throne. So he was the right-hand man before he was, thrown out. And when you get to Revelation, that Jesus' ascension, says he appears as a lamb that were slain. And where does he go? He goes to the right hand of the Father and takes the scroll, the land deed to earth, the dominion of earth and all its inhabitants, and takes it back. So the overall story is a beautiful story, because we went from the Hasatan at the right hand of the Father accusing the brethren day and night, and we traded him in for Jesus Christ at the right hand of the Father, who is our intercessor day and night. I'll take that trade any day. Praise God.
Praise God. And Isaiah 27 verse 1 says, "On that day, the Lord with his cruel and great and strong sword will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, Leviathan, the twisting serpent, and he will kill the dragon that is in the sea."
Boom.
Amen.
I love that, man. Guys, please, where can the audience find you? Doc, we'll start with you, and where they can support you.
Yeah, just Prometheus Lens, guys. Just search, or actually, you don't want to say just that, because that's a famous gun in a video game series. Prometheus Lens podcast. You'll find me anywhere you can consume content. Check out the website, PrometheusLensPodcast.com. And if you like this stuff, man, I'm giving like 2 to 3 bonus episodes every month for my all access pass members. So if you want to contribute to my work, you can buy the book, or you can go to my website and sign up. I have a $4 a month tier. You can get all of my stuff ad free, 48-hour early access to all episodes. And we have the all access pass. That's $10 a month, and you get 48-hour early access, ad-free listening experience, and 3 to 4 bonus episodes every single month. So if you like this kind of stuff and want to support me, that's a really great way to do so. Thank you.
I think it's my turn, but Stephen, you're muted.
I'm muted again.
I read your lips, man. I know.
Perfect.
I know what you said anyway. It's Sixth Sensory Podcast on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, and Patreon for bonus content. Every week I post a bonus episode on Patreon, so I've got that going now. But yeah, I'm really trying to push my Spotify, and you'll find episodes with these two fine gentlemen up there as well. Episodes with Doc, episodes with Steven. So yeah, come over and check out Sixth Sensory Podcast. I spelled out SIX. And yeah, man, this was great. Appreciate both you guys. Appreciate what y'all bring to the table. Had a blast.
Right on, right on. And people, if what helps out our shows is the support in any way possible. It's probably what helps the longevity of what it is we do. There's a tremendous amount of burnout, and especially if people are doing this full time, I think they deserve all the support that they can get. So, folks, be sure to go ahead and support their platforms. Everything will be linked in the description below. Maybe we can collab on this on YouTube, so your guys' channel is all right there and ready and easy access for everybody. But guys, thank you so much for coming onto the show. You guys are my friends. We work together. We're in this space. I don't think we're going anywhere. And it's always a lot of fun. And there's going to be many more awesome conversations that I can't wait to get into in the future. But hey, my hat's off to you guys. You guys do great work. You guys are great researchers. You're great podcasters. You love what you do. And I'm happy to be here. So, but folks,
right there with us, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to get ready to shift on over into the next segment. But gentlemen, thank you again, and I will see you next time. A Biblical Hitman Breakdown. Oh man, I love having those guys on the show. It was awesome to have them on the show together, and like y'all could see in the episode, they bring receipts. They bring good arguments, and also I back some of these things because I think there's validity to a lot of this stuff. But shout out to Tim, Sixth Sensory Podcast, and Doc Brown, Prometheus Lens Podcast. Again, everything will be linked up in the descriptions and stuff. But I felt like a calling to get this episode out there. The main idea, just the main message to get out there to others is that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, and that we do wrestle against principalities and spiritual wickedness in high places. And we know how the verse goes, but there's a physicality to this stuff as well. You have to understand, Satan does things in the physical world. He takes the ideas from God, and he'll do them in some sort of pagan creation worship or some physical style here for people to cling on to and to end up idolizing. And when we get into Genesis and the idea that humanity was altered at some point, our history is significant. Like when we get into Noah, he's perfect in his generations. We get into theorizing and speculating on what the world was like in the antediluvian period, which I think it was completely evil. I think there was a religious system behind it that obviously the heathens and the pagans were worshiping. And I think there was a kingdom. Cain goes out to the east, right? He's cursed to be a cast out. He's cursed to be a castaway. And he goes and he has children. He has Enoch, Lamech, so on and so forth. And a lot of these children, they're known biblically for their expertise, what they were perfectionists in. And, a lot of it can resort back to this idea of the seven sciences, and did this spurious branch of things come from Cain, which yes it did. And you can see why God explains things. You can see why God gets into things like in especially Exodus or Deuteronomy, Leviticus and stuff like this, where God has put rules. Like, it's a good thing. I have a kid. I'm a dad. I give my kid rules. I understand rules. Rules are meant to keep us out of trouble. And I think there is so much to Genesis 6. I think there's so much to Genesis chapter 3. I think it reflects all the way into the future of what's going to take place in Revelation. There are bloodlines and elite families and patriarchs and, I mean, just royalty that controls the world. A lot of it's through finance, right? Money kind of makes the world go round. And you can see when just some of the secret societies we brought up, or some of the bloodlines we brought up, trace them, track them, look into them, and try to pick apart the information yourself. Number one, you can hang out with us and listen to what we have to say. I really encourage people to go out and do the research themselves. But just how this country was formed. We're coming from, an establishment that was in Europe. Now we got to dig into the history of Europe. Well, who were those bloodlines connected to, and those families, and who did they intermingle with or marry into? Again, one thing that I think Satan's really good at is is covering his tracks, or putting up a facade where people see one thing, but really it's made out of something else. And that's the biggest thing about deception is the thing about deception is that you cannot it's like you don't know it's false, or you think it's true. Your awareness is not picking something up. That's the biggest thing with deception. And I think a big thing with these bloodlines is the mystery schools. I think the mystery schools are hooked to these bloodlines, and I think that they've protected the mystery schools. I think they've probably compartmentalized it over the years, and it's really about hidden information, hidden knowledge. Let's just go back to the Bible, right? Let's just go back to what the serpent was deceiving Eve with, and I think there's a lot of things that stack on top of each other with Genesis and the serpent and the garden and the fruit and so on and so forth. If Genesis 6 is our perception of Genesis 6 is that fallen angels came to earth, mated with human women to try and alter and destroy the bloodline of Seth, the bloodline that Christ was to come into. Satan's trying. If you have let me just kind of wrap this back up. I got so many thoughts going off right now. Genesis 6. Fallen angels did what they did. Why can't something happen of that nature happen in Genesis 6? If again, like I made that comparison where this could fit into the pantheon and the pagan structure of their gods. There's these parenting gods, right, that are superior to like these other gods, and I think that's what we see. I think we can see that way of worship, that pagan false trinity, could have been taken from what the devil was trying to do in Genesis. Part of these are part of the plans of Satan, right? If the Antichrist is to come into the world, we know that it's almost like he's the son of Satan, right? So Satan's always had this strategy. He's always been trying to not only disrupt or corrupt or destroy the bloodline that Christ is to come in, but he's trying to also like start his own to mimic and counterfeit the real Christ. So I think that the fallen angels fell into the same idea, right? The same agenda, and trying to run the world. That's what these elites want to do. They want to establish, some sort of kingdom that they'll get power, right, from their God to rule here. And I think that we can make some of these connections with just like what Doc got into with Atlantis, the fact that there is this utopia that Satan wants to build here. And I think it's to mimic the second coming of Christ. I think it's to mimic the millennial reign. I mean, how else do you have the church fall away? How else do you have apostasy? How else do you have, the scripture where Jesus says, if it were even possible, this could deceive the very elect. And I'm very grateful for God pointing things out and opening my eyes to what's going on so that I can hopefully get this message out there. Maybe so, and probably a lot of people will disagree with this, but that's okay. And I want to know why, because I'm here to chop things up with this whole idea, or everything the podcast was getting into. But we can't deny the fact that elites are trying to set up a utopia. When you look at the movies, like just the movie Elysium is a great movie. It's a pentagram that's in the sky. That's like this big space station that the elites go and they live in. And then all of a sudden you have the people on Earth. It's a dystopian time. And people are struggling. People are fighting to survive. People are working all day just to consume enough nutrition that's going to get them by the rest of the day. That's what I'm talking about. There's this Atlantis that these bloodlines want to establish for themselves, have a working class that they can control, and this is like the structure that comes from this kind of Luciferian doctrine where it's just, this is how Satan wants to rule for his short period of time, right, on this earth. So I loved everything that these guys brought to the table. Again, support them. Check out their shows. They've got some solid guests on there. They've got solid shows. These guys are researchers, and it's a lot of fun to get them on my podcast and to get them just to work with them, because there's a lot of things that we're going to, get into. There's a lot of things we're going to speculate on, but then there's a lot of conclusions that we're going to make, and hopefully they can, be very profitable to the Word of God, and let the Word of God start being outreached to others, and that people can start to understand where we're coming from when we're talking about all this stuff. But folks, listen, if you've hung it out with us this long, know that I love you. I appreciate you. I thank you for hanging out. And if you want to support the show, just be sure to head on over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button, like the show, share it with your friends, and drop comments, please. I want to hear what you guys think about the episode. I want to hear what you guys get in, pick apart. Again, opinions. I love them. Some of them hurt, but it's okay, because this is a growing process for me too. And I'm glad that there's an audience that I can interact with. That's something I'm just grateful for. I'm not only on YouTube, folks. I'm also on audio platforms. And, if you're over here on YouTube and you haven't supported the show on the audio platforms, it's simple. Just head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, find the podcast. If you skip a few seconds through an episode, you'll be able to leave a review, and it helps out the show. And again, I'm trying to do what God's called me to do. Again, I'm not perfect, and I'm not right all the time, and I'm humble. And so I think that's a big part, especially or just how I kind of have this podcast. It's important to me to know that I have to be humble and respect the comments and listen, at least just listen to them and interact with it, because again, I'm growing through all of this, but, we got a bunch of guests coming up here for the show for the rest of this month. We're working on the schedule for March, so I'm going to try and get some quality content out there for y'all. But thank you for being here, and can't wait to get another episode out there for you folks. But much love. I'm going to see you.